Hey everybody, it's Hummingbird027 here. Today is March 18th, 2014. Just wanted to give you a quick message. I'm not going to do a newscast tomorrow unless something major is going on in the news. I'll put up a 1 to 2 minute video just to clue you in on what's going on. Have too much on my plate tomorrow. So that'll be Wednesday, March 19th. That there will be no news, so don't expect any news tomorrow, guys. Thanks. So before I begin the news, I really want to talk about some really intense things that are going on in the world right now, and I think we are seeing another leap forward to the 10 Kings actually coming into fruition right now. I apologize for the news being late today, but I was really doing some intense research on this subject and really trying to figure out the intensity of why this asymmetric war ideology is ramping up in the world, and how belt zones are being shattered with permanent instability, and that these are necessary in order to instill the multipolarity world that we are looking at right now, with the coming global economy that is being set up right now. Even though the powers that be will deny this asymmetrical war ideology that is ongoing right now, they're eliminating the ruling centers and the central power or hegemon. They're using these interesting tactics to truly take over some of the lesser countries, as we've been watching since Iraq, the war and the invasion of Iraq, and it's just blossomed since then. I truly believe, after doing quite a bit of studying today, that we are seeing a significant leap forward in the geopolitical scene right now, to the no man may buy or sell prophecy, which is coming to pass. Even a number of verses in the Bible point to the emergence of this potential money trap that is coming. Most specific is the following prophetic text: that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Revelation 13 and 17. A number of new developments over the recent years have hastened the facilitation of just such an event as this is described, and we are seeing a huge leap forward to the rollout and the implications of revealing this prophecy to everybody. I found this interesting article from Wilfred Hahn this morning that I want to share with you very quickly before we get into the news. Unbeknownst to most post-tribbers, it clearly means nobody, anywhere, anyone, or anything will be able to operate in the global economy if you do not accept this mark. So if you think you're going to have a business during the tribulation period, you are sorely mistaken, because the only way in order for you to be prosperous during the tribulation and be able to help people as far as that is to take the mark of the beast, because that is why this system is being set up, is so that people can be controlled. And it's the systematic control system that they are putting in place rapidly right now, that no one on earth can either buy or sell without permission. There are 4 things initially that must take place before Revelation 13 and 17 need to come to fruition. The first 2 have pretty much come to pass. A globally integrated and close financial system must exist. We already have this necessary. And common technologies must be in place. They are getting biotechnology very rapidly in place. We are able to do any kind of transaction anywhere in the world through your iPhones, your cell phones, anywhere, and now they're going to instill, palm reading. They've already done this in Canada with Bitcoin, and in some states in America. Also, retina scanning. This is all coming into play right now, and it has been for quite a few years. Number 2, a system of central banking must be endorsed everywhere, in which is centrally coordinated. This results in a common shared monetary philosophy around the world, which most importantly achieves a strong influence over market and human behavior. In other words, the entire world must agree to play by the same rules and values, thereby obeying and following the actions of monetary officials. This is the modern money equivalent to the suzerains. A suzerain basically is a superior feudal lord to whom fealty is due, or a dominant state controlling the foreign relations of a vassal state, but allowing it sovereign authority in its internal affairs. This is the multipolarity we are seeing as sovereign nations continue to fall by the way. Okay, this gets to the important part. The last 2 pieces of the 4 things that must happen before Revelation 13 and 17 can be in full swing. And I believe this is one of the absolute pieces to the puzzle of Ezekiel 38 and 39, dealing with Russia today, taking over Crimea, not really taking over militarily as far as physically doing it, but through legal means. The third part is the legal statutes and regulatory institutions that oversee the financial activities of individual countries must be superseded by a centralized worldwide authority in order to unify actions that will be enforced. This is the hook in the jaw, folks. It never even occurred to me that Crimea itself could actually be the hook in Russia's jaw. Because of what Russia is doing right now, it's almost like it's a double-edged sword. Russia had to do this in order to come up against the powers that be, trying to, consolidate all the nations into this 10 kingdom system, these 10 kings who will rule and then hand over their power to the beast in time. Russia did this to sort of back up itself, to keep itself growing as a superpower, a new coming superpower in the world. But also this is a double-edged sword, because I think this is going to hurt Russia in the long term, where they are going to be forced to have to seek more resources, which is why in Ezekiel 38 and 39 we see Russia needing to invade Israel to take her spoils. For the final phase, a unified global political economy must exist, either taking the form of a very small group of powerful countries or a single autocrat that is powerful enough to enforce and authorize such controls upon the entire world at a given time. First of all, Russia is not willing to give up its sovereignty. And can you blame them? Since America is obviously not in her right mind, and she has just basically been lulled to sleep, her sovereignty is being stripped away from her by an hourly basis. So we are pretty much finished here in America, and it's sad to say, but all it would take is Americans to start repenting in mass droves for God to turn it the other way. But obviously everybody enjoys their sins too much over here to start doing that. That's why Russia is actually being more godly than America right now, which is, pretty sad, since America is considered a Christian nation. We are obviously not upholding our Christian values, and Russia is actually doing exactly what Americans should have been doing all along. But Russia will finally come to an end as far as the antichristal system coming into play right now. This is why I'm going to start calling Crimea the hook in the jaw. Whatever's going to come out of these sanctions and the newly acquired Crimea into the Russian sphere is only going to hurt Russia in the long run, because this is a play to keep sovereignty, which the Antichrist will not have anyone reigning in his place over him. And indeed, God is going to give the Antichrist full power on the earth for 42 months, so no one can actually be strong enough to oppose him. So we really have to look at the long-term 7-year tribulation and the outcome of all these events. Folks, over the next probably few weeks, I'm really going to delve into this, because I think the 10 toes are starting to show themselves right now, and we should pay careful attention to these initial steps, because the emergence of this commercial colossus is taking over the entire world. Interestingly enough, the Global Trends 2025, in its report back in November 20th of 2008, this is a report that U.S. National Intelligence Council had declared the advent of global multipolar system as one of the world's relative certainties within the 2 decades. And then come 2009, Obama took his office, and with his multipolar worldview, has prioritized rising powers such as Brazil, China, India, and Russia. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said in a July address, "We will lead by inducing greater cooperation among a greater number of actors and reducing competition, tilting the balance away from the multipolar world and towards a multi-partner world." And come 2009 of July 22, check this out. This was in 2009, folks. U.S. Vice President Joseph Biden declares in a speech in the Ukraine, "We are trying to build a multipolar world." In Revelation 18, we know that Babylon the Great is going to come to pass. She is definitely going to be the center of great wealth and commerce in the entire world. We know this because in verse 3 it says, "The merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxuries and gained their wealth through her." Verse 15, "Yet they also are identified as being part of this system." In verse 23, they are referred to as your merchants. Think about it, folks, for just a moment. Consider the rule of large corporations that gird the entire world right now. They benefit, and they are set to benefit greatly from the demise of the sovereign might of nations. The rise of multinational corporations just in the last 50 years alone has been astounding. And who comes in to an economy once it's been decimated? Multinational companies move into power vacuums left by the weakened sovereignty of nations as the world has become rapidly globalized and marshaled by global capital. Global organizations such as the World Trade Organizations, the UN, and the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development have sponsored a virtual landslide of global regulatory reform in recent years that has opened the door to the free reign of global capital and the global business activities of the multinational corporations. Indeed, right now, the whole world stage is being set up to become a market society. This is one of the main things I want to start pointing out, and why materialism, and there's going to be people who are lovers of themselves in the last days who are totally going to disregard their hearts, and people's hearts are growing cold right now, folks. It's because of this market society that I have all that I need and I don't need anything else, especially God in these days. And we're watching this come through in the sweeping acquisition of corporations of the entire not just global economy, but nation states themselves. This is unprecedented. I have not heard one person on the internet or in ministry talk about corporations as being a possible 10-horn scenario. Everybody talks about it being the European Union as the 10 kings that are going to rise to power, and although I don't disagree with that, we also have to include also the Islamic nations involved in this, but not once have I heard anyone talk about the corporations and how they are just sitting there in the background sucking up the entire world right now. These corporations are absolutely bringing in idolatry by entertainment and all other sorts of things, which leads to slavery. Wow. Mark of the beast. Can anyone say mark of the beast? Satan's diabolical agenda is in full swing, folks, to ensnare humanity into a false, idolatrous faith, and we know that these dangers are imminent, and they are forming very rapidly before our eyes. So, folks, to kind of wrap this up a bit, and this is huge because Babylon will be the last kingdom here, and I believe that this will be located in Iraq. And every nation and king will commit adultery with her. This is the agenda of Satan. This is clearly like socialism and communism on steroids, basically, in the end time. And when the system totally collapses at some point here very soon, the merchants were the world's great men. In Revelation 18, verse 23, shows us that the world's greatest men will no longer be kings, priests, and political leaders. Here they are now shown to be merchants, businessmen. When has this ever been true in history, at least on a global scale? This is unprecedented, folks. So whether my speculations are true or not, time is going to tell. I believe Russia is being cornered in the world right now, and they're being like a little piece of meat is being dangled out there for Russia to grab at, and they did it. And this is going to be the hook in the jaw, folks. The corporations are the ones who are really in charge of the planet right now. It's not the EU or the United Nations or America or anybody like that. The corporations have this thing nailed down. And I think Ezekiel 38 and 39 is appearing to me to be more of an act of desperation, a last throw, if you will, for Russia to keep its head above water as the corporations consume the entire world. Russia is going to make one last-ditch effort to secure the oil in Israel in Ezekiel 38 and 39 to continue its reign in the world, but obviously that's not according to God's plan. We know what's going to happen with Russia and all of the people groups who compromise Ezekiel 38 and 39. They are going to be a victim of this antichristal system coming into play because the trap is being set right now on the world stage. That's why I think I needed to spend this time, and thank you for your patience, to really lay this out. And folks, I'm going to bring you some disturbing, at least it was disturbing to me when I'm looking at the news today and I'm seeing the stuff that's going on with Google and eBay and stuff. We're going to get to that at the end of this newscast. Okay? This is bad. This is beyond bad. And I need to point this out because absolutely everything I just talked about for this 20 minutes has everything to do with the newscast today, folks. This has not been in vain, and I appreciate your patience. Okay, going to breeze through quite a few articles very quickly, so look to the description box below if you want to read them entirely for yourselves. 4.7 in Alaska, also seeing a pretty major earthquake off of Ferndale, California, a 4.4, and more fracking quakes in Oklahoma, 2.5, also 4.6 El Salvador, seeing some aftershocks still ongoing in Chile, 5.1 and a 4.9, 4.8 also Chile. Greece seeing another earthquake, 4.5, and 4.1 Turkey, 4.3 Tajikistan, and also Philippines seeing a 4.8, 4.6, 5.0 Papua New Guinea, also 4.7 Vanuatu. Israeli Air Force planes opened fired on terror sites in Syria where terrorists who were connected with the attack on the IDF Jeep earlier on Tuesday. 3 soldiers were injured when an explosive device went off on the Golan Heights as an IDF Jeep was passing by. If you have not watched the video I have done recently, Psalms 83, the destruction of Edom and Tyre, in the description box below, I highly encourage you to watch this. I believe Ezekiel 27 and 28, Zechariah chapter 9, and Zephaniah chapter 2 are all coming to pass right now, and they literally must be fulfilled before the day of the Lord begins. Hezbollah is huge in the news today, and this deals specifically with the city of Tyre as outlined throughout numerous Bible prophecies. And quite frankly, there is an uncanny resemblance to Isaiah 14, Zechariah chapter 9, Obadiah, and Zephaniah chapter 2. There's an uncanny parallel in prophecy that deals with the city of Tyre, Satan in his, how the Holy Spirit defines this satanic agenda taking over right now in Ezekiel 28 and verse 16. By the multitude of thy merchandise they have filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned. And in verse 17, thy heart was lifted up because of thy beauty. Thou hast corrupted thy wisdom by reason of thy brightness. It was the commerce that is doing this right now. It's a very interesting parallel, and all of today's articles are showing this. It's getting interesting. Hezbollah forces stage takeover of Lebanese Sunni town. Gunmen from Hezbollah and other Shia militias which support Assad have reportedly staged a takeover of a Sunni town in Lebanon in response to attacks by Sunni Islamist groups. The town of Arsal on the border with Syria has been the scene of numerous bombings and rocket attacks targeting the Iranian-backed Hezbollah, which has provided crucial support to the pro-regime forces in Syria. And this takeover comes as al-Qaeda-linked groups have threatened revenge against Hezbollah after the group played a crucial role in the fall of the former Syrian rebel bastion of Yarbrud to regime forces. The Nusra Front in Lebanon, believed to have links to the Syrian al-Qaeda franchise of the same name, issued a statement yesterday following the killing of a Hezbollah official, promising more deadly attacks. Folks, Hezbollah, now that they're getting unlimited funding from Iran, is getting very prideful right now, and this is going to cause, the book of Amos really tells us in the first chapter how God's judgments upon Syria are going to be brought to pass, and Tyre is absolutely wrapped up into this. Verse 9, thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Tyrus, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they delivered up the whole captivity to Edom, and remembered not the brotherly covenant. But I will send fire on the wall of Tyrus, which shall devour the palaces thereof. Notice that the Bible and the prophets are very specific always. It's always dealing with Tyrus first. The towns of Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Ekron, all of these things first. Then God, like in Jeremiah chapter 47, deals with all these people first. Then in chapter 48, he turns his attention to the judgment of Moab for their contempt of God. We see the same thing happening, repeating over and over throughout history. I think it's safe to say that we're going to see the same plays being worked out here in the end times. So please keep your eyes on Hezbollah. I think we're going to see some Bible prophecy being fulfilled here very, very shortly with Hezbollah. An investigation into Friday night skirmishes between Israel and Lebanon, during which an explosive device was detonated on the Lebanese side of the border, and the IDF retaliated with shells, has revealed that Hezbollah terrorists succeeded in entering Israel. Walla News reported Monday night that several Hezbollah terrorists successfully trespassed over the border into Israel on Friday night, several hundreds of meters south of the Blue Line. Senior IDF officials are noting that this incident is very serious, considering that the explosives were placed at what many consider to be a most secure point in the Israel and Lebanon borders and should have been detected earlier. All right, going to move in to the news about Russia. I agree wholeheartedly with this article, as Franklin Graham has commended Putin for his opposing of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender agenda in Russia, but is praying for the peace in Ukraine. Whether or not Putin is wrong about invading Crimea or not, what he's doing about taking a stand against this immoral ideology that is taking over the world stage, I think that it's really wonderful that there's somebody out there who's actually saying, no, we are not going to do that here. I wish the leaders in America had such courage. In light of this article, I have to state that I think Putin and Russia is the last vestige of morality on this planet, which is the saddest thing in the world, because we know, because of Ezekiel 38 and 39, that morality is going to come to an abrupt end as the Antichrist and its bestial system takes over the planet very rapidly. But I do want to point out something very interesting here, and this is something that maybe not a lot of people have considered. When looking over Ezekiel 38 and 39, in the very first verse of chapter 38, and the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against it, and say, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. And this is when he will turn him back and put hooks in his jaw. If you check out the referencing in the Bible with Gog and Magog, it takes us to Ezekiel 32 and 26. There is Meshech, Tubal, and all her multitude. Her graves are round about him, all of them uncircumcised, slain by the sword, though they caused their terror in the land of the living. We also go back to Ezekiel 27 and 13, where it states, Javan, Tubal, and Meshech, they were thy merchants. Now we're getting somewhere. They traded the persons of men and vessels of brass in thy market. Or in the site it says merchandise. And guess what? This references Revelation chapter 18, verse 13. They are directly tied in. Whether this is going to be Putin or not, what is going on here in Ezekiel 38 and 39 is directly tied in with the merchants of the earth. Amazing, folks. Amazing. It continues on in Ezekiel 27 and verse 14. They of the house of Togarmah traded in thy fairs with horses and horsemen and mules. And in 15, the men of Dedan were thy merchants, Saudi Arabia. Many isles were the merchants of thy hand. They brought thee a present, horns of ivory and ebony. Syria was thy merchant by reason of the multitudes of thy wares of thy making. They occupied in their fairs with emeralds, purple, and broidered work, and fine linen, and coral, and agate. This new revelation is truly showing that the corporations are really the ones who are making these plays and these end time prophecies. So if Putin is really in charge of the country when Ezekiel 38 and 39 comes around, he will either have been corrupted, or his true side will come out. Folks, I also believe that there is a principality involved here too, a prince of Gog out of the land of Magog that also comes back 1,000 years at the end of the 1,000-year millennial reign of Jesus Christ. Gog shows his ugly face again and tries to come against Israel once again at the end there, and God completely wipes them out for a second and final time before the great white throne judgment begins. So just some very interesting stuff I had to throw out here today because I have learned so much this morning, and I have to share that with you all because as we get closer to all these final events coming into play, the Bible is just really opening up. And just on Joel Rosenberg's blog, history is repeating again and again and again. Putin annexes Crimea 76 years to the week after Hitler annexed Austria. So on April 10th, Hitler ordered a national referendum in Austria. Austrians approved of Hitler's annexation with a vote of almost 100% in favor. Now Russia is doing the same thing. He sent Russian military forces in to invade the country, then orchestrated a national referendum in southern Ukraine region with a 97% in favor of this. And I am no way saying that Putin is Hitler, nor am I comparing him whatsoever to the maniac Hitler. And I truly see this as he is just trying to salvage what he can of Russia, and he's not getting the bigger picture, folks. He is not understanding that the Antichrist will consume all the sovereign nations of the world, and he's basically taking a stand because he doesn't want to be a part of this. And I think this is more apparent now than anything else. I could be totally way off, but World War III is going to be based on a war for resources that are quickly dwindling on the world stage. So Putin has signed the treaty to make Crimea part of Russia, and the White House has summoned G7 leaders for a conference on the Ukraine crisis next Tuesday. Its other members after Russia's suspension are the UK, Germany, France, Canada, Italy, and Japan. And shortly after the Putin speech before the Russian lower house on Tuesday, French Foreign Minister Fabius said that the Group of Eight had suspended Russia's participation in the Group of Eight, and there will be 7 countries at the next summit, he said. However, the Russian president was still invited to visit France on June 6th at the moment. So here we are. If Russia don't play the game, if Putin doesn't play the game with the rest of the corporations of the earth, then you don't get to play with us. You know, talk about kindergarten mentality here. If you don't play along with us, you can't be with us. And so that's why this is all really just coming home for me today, folks. And so what really is the next logical step? What's the next question we should be asking is, what is Russia going to do now? Since Crimea voted to join Russia on Sunday, and cities in East Ukraine wish to follow in their footsteps, ethnic Russians in Luhansk are the latest to voice their wish to be a part of Russia one by one by one. All these little townships or city-states, not really sure what to call them over there, are going to secede from the Ukraine. And Putin says Russia will retaliate to the sanctions. One of the things that Putin has failed to mention in his nearly hour-long annexation speech was the topic of retaliation to Western sanctions, which had caused many to assume that he wouldn't even bother, but Reuters had provided some clarity on this, that Putin said Tuesday that Western attempts to frighten Russia with sanctions over its takeover of Ukraine's Crimea region would be viewed as an act of aggression, and that Moscow would retaliate. So we know that he is making plans to do more drastic measures here. So the details will be forthcoming, and that the West, whose every bluff has been called and every gambit has failed, will need another teleprompted conference by the leader of the free world, Obama, explaining once again just what the cost, red lines, invisible red lines, and escalating sanctions against Russia will be. And don't forget that Ukraine is hiking out tensions again, saying that the Russian army is concentrated near eastern border and ready for a quick invasion. And Ukraine has also dispatched tanks in the rolling terrain of the Donbas Basin on Monday, putting its biggest guns back on the scene of the biggest armored clash in history. And Ukraine is definitely building up and mobilizing their equipment in response to the Russian military buildup on that eastern border. And not making matters any better, the Ukrainian leader has threatened to blow up Russia's gas pipelines. Ukraine's deputy national security chief and leader of the national group Right Sector threatened to destroy Russia's gas pipelines in retaliation for the country's recent actions in the Ukraine. If they want an invasion of Russia anytime soon, this will do it. And one thing we need to keep at the back of our minds at all times over this whole entire situation is that Russia is literally one move away from collapsing the entire U.S. economy. On March 17th, commodities advisor Jim Sinclair spoke in an interview with Greg Hunt of USA Watchdog on gold, the markets, and ongoing events. During the 30-minute interview, Sinclair laid out a chilling scenario where Russia has positioned themselves to be one move away from collapsing the U.S. economy, and the one wrong move by President Obama could set the entire scenario in motion. This article you can read entirely for yourself at prophecyupdate.blogspot.com, but since stock markets are forward-thinking and they project what will happen 6 months into the future, and if you look at what has taken place for the dollar since Ukraine's uprising started and Russia moved into Crimea, the dollar itself, by falling below 80 on the dollar index, is telling the world that it is not only recognizing the potential of becoming irrelevant should Russia bypass the SWIFT system and begin selling oil in another currency or asset class, but that the U.S. could potentially trigger its own demise by imposing these sanctions using the SWIFT system as a weapon and force Russia to enact their nuclear economic option. Folks, if you do not have yourselves prepared spiritually and physically in this world right now, I suggest you do so right this moment. And obviously, China is going to follow in Russia's footsteps. While Mark Faber is adamant that there's lots of funny things that are happening in China, and when the whole thing unwinds, it will be a disaster. It is his comments with regard to Ukraine and Russia that are worth paying significant new attention to, as the Gloom, Boom, and Doom report editor notes that if you put yourself in Putin's shoes, he did the right thing from his perspective, given Crimea's strategic importance. However, Crimea moving to Russia gives essentially a signal to China that one day they can also move and seize some territory that they perceive belongs to them, namely Taiwan and some islands that Japan has been fighting over with them, i.e. et al. And while all of this is going on in the world to distract your attention away from the Middle East, the things that are going on has cast a shadow over the second round of talks set to begin on Tuesday today in Vienna on a permanent nuclear agreement with Iran. If Russia signals that its cooperation with the West has weakened, this will reduce pressure on Iran. I cannot tell you how important this statement is, folks. Jeremiah chapter 49, dealing with Iran, which is southwestern Iran, where most of the active nuclear facilities are located in Iran that are a direct threat to Israeli sovereignty. This is the most important statement I think I could make today on this newscast. Whatever's going to come out of today's talks or concluding of these second attempts at trying to get the nuclear program worked out with Iran is going to basically be what Israel's going to do with Elam, which is part of that section of Iran and Bible prophecy. It's funny how these talks have taken a complete backseat and nobody's really talking about them at all, but because of what's going on with Russia, Iran is going to feel much less pressured to make any concessions with the P5+1 and the squabbling going on with all of this. The Iranians are watching and waiting. They're not inclined to make any concessions anyway, but they are going to be less inclined until there is a resolution. And sort of tying this all together is this wonderful article from The Guardian today. NASA-funded study, industrial civilization headed for irreversible collapse. A new study sponsored by NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center has highlighted the prospects that global industrial civilization could collapse in coming decades, which is probably sooner than later, due to unsustainable resource exploitation and increasingly unequal wealth distribution. Noting that warnings of a collapse are often seen to be fringe or controversial, the study attempts to make sense of compelling historical data showing that the process of rise and collapse is actually a recurrent cycle. Keep telling you folks, history repeats itself. That's why we have the Bible, to learn from our mistakes. It's found throughout history, and cases of severe civilizational disruption due to precipitous collapse, often lasting centuries, have been quite common. And folks, I know this was a spirit-led newscast today because just the wording in this article alone has confirmed a lot for me. The NASA-funded Handy model offers a highly credible wake-up call to the governments, corporations, and businesses and consumers to recognize that business as usual cannot be sustained and that policy and structural changes are required. Get it immediately. Okay? I don't know what else I could possibly say to this effect. The perfect storm is being created in the world, and the 10 kings, these 10 toes, are showing themselves now. All right, folks, I am going to start to wind down this newscast. There is a lot of news I did not get to, so you'll have to look in the description box for those articles. This is going to wrap up what I believe is really going on. We see these consolidations and mergers. They're happening almost on a day-to-day basis, but these are huge, huge signposts. Google and eBay merger suggested amid e-commerce upheaval. Don't know if you all can recall, but last month, eBay, Etsy, and Google and a couple of other e-commerce people were invited to the White House for a pretty secretive meeting, which took place over a 2-day period. Nobody knows what went on in this meeting, but these are the articles that are now coming out because of that meeting last month. There are prophetic winds in the air of Revelation 13, 17, and 18. Google is struggling to keep up with rivals in the e-commerce and payments arena. eBay is being openly and forcibly laughable, challenged to spin off its PayPal online payment company, while Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba plans for a huge cash infusion on these shores. Some are suggesting that an acquisition of eBay by Google represents a possible best of both worlds opportunity that would provide eBay investors the extra value that Carl Icahn is seeking to unlock while boosting Google's segments that are currently struggling. Folks, it's laughable that you would even get the picture that Google is struggling financially. What a joke. This is an absolute corporate buyout to accumulate global economic currency, and Google is leading the charge, folks. Since Google is a CIA puppet, acquiring eBay and PayPal would make all sorts of transactions, purchases, everything made known to NSA and other powers that be for the one world global currency. They make it sound very good that these companies have to do this to save themselves, which is a total outright lie. None of these companies need to do this. They are doing this, however, to bring the world into an entire global economic system. And this is going to be a huge, huge step forward to the mark of the beast. And poor Google is losing shares in e-commerce search to Amazon, which is, interestingly enough, being backed by CARE and organizations of the Muslim Brotherhood, of which I reported on a few days ago, with more competition on the horizon from companies such as Alibaba, Pinterest, and social networks such as Facebook, Twitter, and potentially messaging apps. Alibaba announced on Sunday that it would make an initial public offering in the United States, which could bring the Chinese company a record-breaking cash haul for a technology company. Another Google competitor, Yahoo, stands to profit handsomely, as the Sunnyvale internet giant owns 24% of the company, even after selling half its stake for roughly $7.6 billion in 2012. What we are really talking about all of this is the total acquisition of all e-commerce under the Google complex. And not only just e-commerce, folks, but they are also acquiring artificial intelligence companies. They are truly becoming the merchants of the earth. So this newscast is a very bizarre newscast, folks. I have taken probably the last 5 hours to do this newscast. I'm not really sure why the Holy Spirit is pushing me in this direction. Not really pushing me, but showing me that there are some major things going on, and we cannot disregard these articles right now, because I believe that this is what the prophet Daniel foresaw in the book of Daniel, and we are in the season, folks. The Bible clearly tells us that we cannot know the exact time of Christ's return, but he stated in Matthew 21 and 28, when these things begin to take place, stand up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. He indicated that many conditions that would characterize the season of his return. And I think that's one of the reasons why this video was done specifically the way it was done today, because things are being set up now for the 7-year tribulation. I think it's very important to also point out that even though the world is experiencing this financial crisis, these are only, shall I say, temporary pains to the great increase of wealth that is going to come on this planet during the last stages here of human history. A prominent financial characteristic of the last days is clearly revealed in the book of James. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. James, the half-brother of Jesus, charges in his prophecy to rich people in James 5 and 3, You have lived on the earth in luxury and self-indulgence, he goes on to say. James tells us that wealth will be amassed in the last days. There are two aspects to this specific prophecy. There's the increase of wealth, which will be signified by World War III and the acquisition of all the resources on the planet. And there will be hoarding. And even though it doesn't seem like it now, because the poor are actually becoming poorer, the middle class is being wiped out, it may not seem that this is the way it's going, but it truly will be. We can for sure know this because when Jesus Christ tells us about the church of Laodicea in Revelation chapter 3, he says about this church in verse 17, I am rich, I have acquired wealth, and do not need a thing. I mean, just looking at the mega churches out there that have Starbucks inside the church, merchandising the church in the world is just another huge hint of where we are in the last days. And we can also see that there is a widening gap between the world's rich and the poor. It's happening very rapidly too. And this is creating a sense of hoarding in the world between the have and the have-nots. Hoarding is one thing. Preparing for emergencies is another. Like what I tell you on this channel to buy food, medicines, and water, this is not for long-term use. This is to keep you out of harm's way. When the initial collapse happens, you don't want to be out on the streets, folks. You don't want to be out there getting killed, having your family kidnapped right before your eyes, whatever kind of evil thing goes on during riots and crises like that. You don't want to be out there and a part of all that. That's the reason why I tell you to stock food and water and medicines so that you can, stay in your home or your safe place and kind of ride out the worst part of the crisis. And it will calm down, but you don't want to be a part of the fever that is involved when the crisis actually hits. By hoarding, and what I think the corporations are doing now, such as Google, is if hoarding is to pile up human labor obligations, this follows that if someone is to own or receive the benefit of someone's human labor, then another person must be surrendering this amount of labor in one way or another. This stratification and skewing of the world's real wealth has been a long-running process. And this has been going on for hundreds of years, and it's been well documented. Folks, I think the underlying theme of this newscast is truly what's coming. And it's going to be an eruption of greed and absolute materialism. It will absolutely be the worship of mammon. And as the UN has, the Tower of Babel and just the whole symbolism going on through the many decades, it will be the worship of the god of the gross domestic product and the goal of its annual and continuous growth that will sweep the entire world into one lump sum. Some other points I would like to make before I close this newscast. Before wealth becomes the dominating factor of the 7-year tribulation, everything has to go bankrupt. Everything has to crash so it can be restructured. I think it's very interesting if you follow the seals of Revelation, how famine and pestilence and war and all these things come first, and then you see the slow build up to the global economy in the midst of the tribulation. Also, James 3 and 5 reveals the fact that at one point during the end times, and a lot of people are doing just the opposite. They're buying up gold and silver like crazy. not knowing that it's going to corrode. Listen to what James says. Now listen, you rich people. Weep and wail because of the misery that is coming upon you. Your wealth has rotted, and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. What could this possibly mean? The one possibility that James could be predicting here is the debasement of the value of gold and silver in the end times. And folks, this would go hand in hand with a one world fiat currency where you have to take the mark of the beast, where it would be based on credit. It would be invisible monetary system. While gold has always been considered a metal of great value, its price has nevertheless been subject to fluctuation over human history. James's statement would be of little value if it were to mean that the price of gold will only continue to fluctuate much as it has over time. Much as today's economists and wealth strategists offer this type of prediction all the time, on the one hand, the price of gold may go up, on the other, it may decline. But this interpretation of corroding gold and silver must, however, fit within the context of the segment of Scripture quoted. The previous verse admonishes the rich and warns them that their wealth would rot and their clothes will be moth-eaten. James is referring to wealth in general. Taking all of these verses of James together, we can see another huge piece to the puzzle of what's coming on the world stage, because it's logical to conclude that James is revealing that the wealth of the rich, be that perhaps of individuals or sovereign nations themselves, will be destroyed and or debased. And I think I don't need to suggest that this could be the very reason why America is no longer found in Bible prophecy or is not a player in end-time Bible prophecies before Ezekiel 38 and 39 comes to pass. How close are we, everyone? This is amazing revelation that God gave to me this morning. A major decline in wealth is foretold in the Bible. So in light of all that I presented here today in this newscast, I'm really seeing this trend of the 10 toes, these 10 horns, these 10 kings really coming out. And I'm thinking they're going to be corporate heads themselves. I would even venture to guess, now this is just a hypothesis, that, the head of Google might be one of these kings. And as we watch all of the sovereign nations fall under the global corporatism these days, where the merchants of the world are just becoming increasingly and substantially enriched, I think in light of this, a lot of what's going on in the Middle East and with Russia right now makes a lot more sense to me, and why people do the things that they do. And it's all for the love of money if you don't have the love of Jesus in your heart. Folks, this has been the strangest newscast I think I've done on my time on YouTube here, but I guess it was significantly important for what is coming next. I think the events that we're going to see transpire here this year are going to come to pass very rapidly. And I encourage you, if you do not know Jesus Christ as the Son of God, that you turn to Him now and get to know Him and start that binding, deep relationship with your Creator, Sustainer, and Maker, and be reconciled to the Father in heaven, because things are moving very quickly. And even quicker than that will be the harpazo of the bride of Christ, which will happen in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye. So keep looking up, folks. We are definitely going home very soon. God bless you all, and Maranatha.